My wife's sister, the HR, emailed me after I refused to work on vacation. Your role is eliminated. Your severance is canceled. I calmly replied, thanks. The next morning, their lawyer read the exit clause aloud to the entire board. The CEO's coffee hit the floor. Too late now. Look, I'm not the kind of guy who brags about achieving inner peace or finding himself on some spiritual journey. But let me tell you something about lying on a beach in Santorini with absolutely nothing on your mind except whether to order another piña colada or switch to a mojito. It's the closest thing to heaven that doesn't require a harp and a halo. The sun was doing that perfect late afternoon thing where it wasn't trying to roast you alive anymore, just gently warming your skin like a benevolent fire god who'd finally learned some chill. My nose was slathered with enough sunscreen to protect a small family of tourists, and I had successfully convinced myself that my work inbox was a fictional concept created by pessimists and people who hate fun. My wife Mara was somewhere behind me, probably taking her 73rd photo of the same whitewashed building for Instagram, trying to find the angle that would make our friends back in Seattle simultaneously jealous and inspired to book their own overpriced Mediterranean escape. The waiter, this smooth-talking Greek guy named Dimitri, who'd been flirting with every female tourist within a 5-mile radius, had just brought me my third drink of the day, complete with one of those tiny umbrellas that serve absolutely no practical purpose, but somehow make everything taste better. Life was good. Life was simple. Life was exactly what it should be when you're on vacation and pretending that conference calls, quarterly reports, and passive-aggressive email chains don't exist in your universe. And then my phone buzzed. Now, here's the thing about phones on vacation. They're like that one friend who doesn't understand boundaries. You know the type. The one who shows up at your door at midnight because they just wanted to talk, or text you during a movie because they saw a meme you absolutely had to see right that second. My phone was that friend, and it had been remarkably well-behaved for the past 4 days. I should have known it was too good to last. I ignored the first buzz. Probably just Mara sending me another photo to approve before she posted it. Or maybe my buddy Jake sending me a gif of someone falling off a jet ski with the caption, "This could be us, but you're in Greece being bougie." The second buzz made me squint one eye open. The third buzz made me sigh like a divorced dad who just got asked to help move furniture. I picked up the phone, fully prepared to see something completely mundane, and that's when I saw the email notification that would have made a lesser man choke on his little umbrella. Subject: Your role has been eliminated. Your severance is canceled. The sender? Tessa Morrison, HR Director at Helios Dynamics. Professional busybody. Champion of corporate bureaucracy. And here's the real kicker. My wife's beloved older sister, who had somehow convinced an entire company that she was a competent human resources executive despite having the emotional intelligence of a parking meter and the management style of a medieval warlord. I stared at that subject line for a solid 10 seconds, my brain doing that thing where it tries to process information but gets stuck buffering like a cheap laptop trying to load a YouTube video. Then I opened the email, because apparently I'm a masochist who enjoys ruining perfectly good beach days. The body of the email was a masterpiece of corporate passive aggression. Tessa had used every HR buzzword in the book: organizational restructuring, strategic realignment, difficult but necessary decisions, all while essentially saying, "You're fired, and by the way, that severance package we promised you? Yeah, we're keeping that too. Thanks for playing." She'd even had the audacity to sign off with "wishing you all the best in your future endeavors," which is corporate speak for "good luck finding another job, loser." I read it once, then twice, then a third time, just to make absolutely sure I wasn't hallucinating from too much sun exposure or that sketchy seafood we'd had for lunch. Dimitri the waiter noticed me staring at my phone and wandered over, probably thinking I'd gotten bad news from home or discovered my credit card had been maxed out. "Everything okay, my friend?" he asked, in that concerned but not too concerned way that service industry people master after years of dealing with dramatic tourists. I looked up at him and started laughing. Not a polite chuckle or a nervous giggle, but a full-blown, doubled-over, tears streaming down my face laugh that made the German couple at the next table stop mid-conversation and stare at me like I'd just announced I was running for president. Dimitri took a step back, clearly reconsidering his decision to check on the crazy American. "Sir, are you?" "I'm perfect," I managed to gasp between laughs. "Absolutely perfect." Because here's what Tessa didn't know. Here's what she couldn't possibly know. Because she'd been too busy playing office politics and perfecting her talent for making everyone around her miserable to actually read the fine print. That severance package she'd just canceled? The exit clause that supposedly protected the company from having to pay out when they fired someone? I wrote it. Every single word. Every comma. Every perfectly crafted loophole that looked like it protected the company, but actually, if you knew where to look, if you understood how contract law actually worked, if you weren't a complete moron who rubber-stamped documents without reading them, protected the employee instead. I'd spent 2 years at Helios Dynamics building their entire legal framework from scratch. I'd written their employee handbook, their executive agreements, their termination policies. And buried in Section 9, subsection B of the Executive Employment Contract, the one that both Tessa and our brilliant CEO Gavin had signed without bothering to actually read, was a clause that made terminating an executive without written cause more expensive than a failed startup in Silicon Valley. I composed my reply with the kind of calm that comes from knowing you're holding all the cards in a poker game where everyone else thinks they're playing checkers. One word. Short, polite, and more lethal than any legal threat I could have made. Thanks. I hit send, set my phone face down on the table, and took a long, satisfying sip of my piña colada. Dimitri was still hovering nearby, clearly confused about whether he should call for medical help or just let the strange American work through whatever psychotic break he was having. I didn't panic. I didn't call Mara over to have a crisis conversation about our financial future. I didn't even flinch. Because while Tessa was probably sitting in her corner office right now, feeling smug about ruining my vacation and my career in one perfectly timed email, she had no idea that she'd just activated the most expensive mistake of her professional life. That exit clause was about to bite harder than a jealous sister-in-law at Thanksgiving dinner, and I had front row seats to watch it all go down. I raised my glass toward the sunset, grinning like an idiot. Yamas, I said to nobody in particular. This vacation just got a whole lot more interesting. 2 years before that beautiful Santorini email arrived, I was sitting in a WeWork knockoff in downtown Seattle, interviewing for a position at a company that barely existed outside of a PowerPoint presentation in one guy's fever dream. The office, and I use that term generously, consisted of exactly 5 laptops, a coffee maker that looked like it had survived a small war, 2 standing desks that nobody actually used for standing, and a whiteboard covered in incomprehensible diagrams that I'm pretty sure were just random circles and arrows connecting buzzwords like disruption and scalability, and my personal favorite, synergistic ecosystem integration. The company was called Helios Dynamics, which sounded impressive until you realized it was basically a fancy Greek name slapped onto what was essentially a glorified consulting firm that wanted to pretend it was a tech startup. Their business model? Help other companies optimize their operational infrastructure through data-driven strategic frameworks. Translation: they told other businesses how to do their jobs better, despite having approximately 0 experience doing anything successfully themselves. But hey, they had venture capital funding and a CEO who believed in the power of cold brew coffee and motivational speeches, so naturally, I took the job. Gavin Chun was the kind of guy who walked into a room and immediately made you feel like you were either about to change the world or join a cult, sometimes both. He was 34 years old, wore exclusively black turtlenecks like he was auditioning to be Steve Jobs' stunt double, and had this habit of making intense eye contact while talking about vision and disruption that made you wonder if he'd been practicing in front of a mirror. If Tony Stark and a motivational quote poster from a high school guidance counselor's office had a baby, and that baby grew up reading nothing but TED Talk transcripts and Malcolm Gladwell books, that baby would be Gavin Chun. Our first meeting lasted 3 hours. 3 hours. Most job interviews are like speed dating. You've got 15 minutes to convince someone you're not completely incompetent. They pretend to care about your resume. Everyone shakes hands and lies about following up. Not with Gavin. This man wanted to discuss my entire life philosophy, my thoughts on corporate culture, whether I believed in destiny, and at one point, I swear to God, he asked me what animal I would be if I had to represent the company's core values. I told him a honey badger because they don't give a damn and they get stuff done. He loved that. Hired me on the spot. Caleb, he said, leaning back in his chair like a Silicon Valley prophet who'd just discovered fire. I need someone who understands that we're not just building a company here. We're building a movement. We're creating something that's going to fundamentally transform how businesses operate in the 21st century. We're going to be the backbone of innovation. I nodded along, mostly because the pay was significantly better than my previous job at a mid-sized firm where my biggest accomplishment had been successfully arguing that we didn't need to capitalize best practices in every single document. And also because there's something weirdly intoxicating about someone believing in something that hard, even if that something is completely ridiculous. He called me his strategic backbone, which I thought was a pretty solid title until I realized it basically meant I was responsible for literally everything that involved paperwork, legal compliance, or making sure we didn't accidentally commit fraud. Gavin was the ideas guy, the visionary, the face of the company who showed up to meetings and talked about paradigm shifts and revolutionary approaches. I was the guy who made sure those ideas didn't land us in federal prison. I called him my unpaid therapist because about half of our late-night meetings, and there were a lot of late-night meetings, weren't actually about work at all. Gavin would order Thai food at 9 p.m., sprawl across the couch in our shoebox office, and spend 2 hours venting about everything from stock option valuations to his complicated relationship with his parents to whether he should get a dog or if that would make him seem too settled for a startup CEO. Do you think investors take you less seriously if you have a golden retriever? He asked me once at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, while I was trying to finalize our employee benefits package. Gavin, I think investors take you less seriously when you show up to pitch meetings in Yeezys, but you still do that. So maybe just get the dog. He did not get the dog. He got a subscription to a meditation app instead and talked about mindfulness for 6 weeks straight. But here's the thing. Despite all the corporate nonsense and the motivational poster energy and the fact that Gavin sometimes made decisions based on what his horoscope said, we actually built something real. It started with just the two of us and a contractor named Dmitry. Yes, same name as my waiter in Santorini. Different guy. This one was a Russian programmer who exclusively wore basketball jerseys and could code for 16 hours straight without blinking. Then we brought on Leo, a CFO who'd gotten fired from his last job for telling the board they were financially illiterate morons during an earnings call, which honestly made me like him immediately. We built everything from scratch. HR policies? I wrote them. Financial frameworks? Leo and I hammered them out over approximately 700 cups of terrible office coffee. Employee benefits? I researched every startup in Seattle, figured out what they were offering, and made ours just slightly better so we could actually recruit people who weren't desperate or delusional. Gavin handled the clients, the fundraising, the public appearances where he'd talk about our innovative approach to organizational excellence while wearing those ridiculous turtlenecks. And it worked. Against all odds, against all logic, against my own skepticism, it actually worked. We landed our first major client, a manufacturing company that needed help streamlining their supply chain. Then another. Then a tech company that wanted to restructure their entire operations. Within 18 months, we'd gone from 5 laptops and a dream to an actual office with a reception area and everything. We hired a full team, project managers, analysts, even a marketing coordinator named Ashley who was perpetually excited about literally everything and made inspirational posters for the break room that said things like, "Teamwork makes the dream work," and "Fail forward." I spent those early days working 80-hour weeks, living on takeout and optimism, watching Gavin pitch our services to skeptical executives while somehow convincing them that yes, this guy in a turtleneck absolutely knew how to fix their decades-old business problems. And you know what? Sometimes he actually did. Sometimes his crazy ideas worked. Sometimes that whiteboard full of random circles and arrows actually translated into strategies that saved companies money and improved their operations. We were a team. A weird, dysfunctional, over-caffeinated team, but a team nonetheless. Gavin was the guy who made everything loud, who got people excited, who could walk into a room and make investors believe we were the next big thing. I was the guy who made everything legal, who wrote the contracts, who made sure all those big ideas didn't collapse under the weight of their own ambition. Late nights turned into early mornings, turned into blurred weeks where I couldn't remember if I'd gone home or just napped on the office couch. Gavin and I developed this shorthand language where he'd say something like, "What if we paradigm shifted the vertical integration and I'd translate it into actual English and figure out how to make it happen without violating any employment laws. It was exhausting. It was chaotic. It was probably terrible for my health and definitely terrible for my sleep schedule. But it was also kind of perfect, until Gavin decided we needed to professionalize our human resources infrastructure and hired someone to run our HR department. Someone who came with impeccable credentials, glowing recommendations, and a smile that should have come with a warning label. Someone who happened to be my wife's sister. That's when everything went from startup chaos to a completely different kind of nightmare. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For those first 2 golden years, before Tessa walked through our door with her psychology degree and her master's in manipulation, Helios Dynamics was actually fun. We were building something real, something that mattered, something that was ours. I should have known it was too good to last. The day Tessa Morrison walked into Helios Dynamics wearing a power suit that probably cost more than my first car and heels that clicked against our newly installed hardwood floors like a countdown timer to my personal doom, I knew my life was about to get significantly more complicated. Not in the fun way, like when you decide to try extreme sports or adopt a puppy that turns out to be half-wolf. No, this was the kind of complicated that comes with warning labels and insurance clauses and the nagging feeling that you should have read the fine print before signing your life away. Gavin had announced her hiring during our Monday morning team meeting with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for lottery winners or people who just discovered their ex got really ugly. Everyone, I want you to meet our new Director of Human Resources, Tessa Morrison. She's got her master's in organizational psychology from Northwestern, 5 years of experience at a Fortune 500 company, and she's going to help us take our people operations to the next level. He said, next level, like it was a physical place we could visit, maybe somewhere between Narnia and that Swedish furniture store everyone gets lost in. Ashley, our perpetually optimistic marketing coordinator, actually applauded. Leo, who'd been with us long enough to be appropriately cynical about new hires, just raised his coffee mug in a half-hearted salute that could have meant either welcome or good luck, you're gonna need it. I sat there frozen, watching my wife's sister strut into the conference room like she was walking a runway at Fashion Week, armed with a leather portfolio, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and apparently a PhD in making my life a living hell that I hadn't known she'd been working on. Tessa was 36, 3 years older than my wife Mara, and had spent those extra 3 years cultivating the kind of personality that makes you immediately check your wallet after shaking hands with her. She had this way of looking at people like she was simultaneously assessing their net worth and deciding whether they were worth her time, usually in that order. Her hair was always perfect, her makeup was always flawless, and her ability to make backhanded compliments sound like genuine praise was Oscar-worthy. "Caleb," she exclaimed when Gavin introduced us. Even though we'd literally had Thanksgiving dinner together 6 weeks ago, and she'd spent the entire meal telling me about her amazing new opportunity, without mentioning it was at my company. What a wonderful surprise. I had no idea you worked here. This is going to be so much fun, working with family. Her tone suggested that fun was a synonym for controlled psychological warfare, and that family was less about blood relation and more about having unlimited access to embarrassing stories she could weaponize during performance reviews. Gavin, bless his oblivious little startup heart, thought this was fantastic. Wait, you two know each other? This is perfect. Caleb's married to your sister? Man, this is like destiny. The universe is literally aligning our team dynamics. Yeah, I said, managing a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. It's definitely something. What I didn't say was that Tessa had spent the last 4 years since I'd married Mara making it abundantly clear that she thought her little sister could have done better. Much better. Like, literally anyone else better. During our wedding planning, she'd asked Mara, within my earshot, if she was really sure about marrying someone who worked in middle management at some consulting company. At our wedding reception, she'd given a maid of honor speech that included the phrase, "Well, I guess love is blind," while looking directly at me. And at every single family gathering since, she'd managed to slip in little comments about my career trajectory, my financial prospects, or my general worthiness as a human being. And now she was my colleague. Worse, she was HR, which meant she had access to my salary information, my performance reviews, and probably my browser history if she really wanted to dig. This was like giving your least favorite person a key to your house and also the password to your bank account. The first week was all charm and professionalism. Tessa set up one-on-one meetings with everyone on the team to get to know them better and understand their needs. When she met with me, she spent 45 minutes asking about my role, my responsibilities, my relationship with Gavin, and whether I felt adequately supported in my professional development. "You know, Caleb," she said, leaning back in her chair with a smile that would have made a shark nervous, "I think there's so much untapped potential here. You've done an amazing job building the foundational framework, but now that we're growing, we need to think about scaling up our leadership structure. Have you thought about where you see yourself in the next 5 years?" It was a trap question. I knew it was a trap question. If I said I wanted to stay where I was, she'd mark me down as lacking ambition. If I said I wanted to advance, she'd position herself as the gatekeeper to that advancement. There was no winning move here, only varying degrees of losing. "I'm pretty happy with what I'm doing," I said carefully. "I like building systems, creating structure. It's what I'm good at." She wrote something in her notebook that I couldn't see but absolutely knew was some version of complacent, minimal growth mindset. By week 2, things got weirder. Tessa started staying late at the office, which would have been fine except that Gavin also always stayed late, and suddenly their strategic planning sessions were happening at 8 p.m. over wine that definitely wasn't in our office budget. Ashley mentioned seeing them laughing together in the conference room, and Dimitri, the programmer, who generally paid attention to nothing except his code, even commented that the new lady is always in boss's office. Then came the emails. Oh, the emails. They started innocently enough, meeting requests, policy updates, the usual HR stuff. But then I started noticing little things. An email to Gavin with me CC'd that began with, "Honey, can you review this policy draft?" followed immediately by another email. "Oops. So sorry, Caleb. That was meant for someone else." Sure it was. Just like how she accidentally sent me a meeting invitation for date night planning that was clearly meant for someone else, or how she kept scheduling one-on-one meetings with Gavin during times she knew I was trying to meet with him, or how she started referring to herself as Chief People Officer in her email signature, even though that definitely wasn't her title. Leo noticed it too. We were grabbing lunch at this terrible sandwich place across the street, the kind where everything is slightly too wet and you're never quite sure what you just ate. When he leaned across the table and said, "Dude, is it just me? Or is your sister-in-law basically running the company now?" "She's not running anything," I said, but even I didn't believe it. "She's in every meeting. She's got Gavin's ear on literally everything. Last week, she vetoed my budget proposal because she said it didn't align with our people-first values." Since when do we have people-first values? We're a consulting firm. We have Excel spreadsheets and client deliverables. He wasn't wrong. Tessa had this way of framing everything as an HR issue, which meant she got final say on basically everything. Hiring decisions? HR. Restructuring? HR. Office policies? HR. What kind of coffee we bought for the break room? Apparently also HR, because it affected employee morale and workplace satisfaction. And Gavin ate it up. He loved having someone who spoke his language, who could turn his vague ideas about culture and engagement into actual policies. Never mind that most of those policies involved giving Tessa more authority and me less access. By month 3, my parking spot, the one that had been mine since we moved into this office, was suddenly under evaluation for optimal space utilization. My system access got temporarily suspended for a security audit that lasted 2 weeks and somehow never affected anyone else. Projects I'd been leading got reassigned to cross-functional teams that Tessa just happened to chair. I started coming in early, leaving late, documenting everything. Because I'm not an idiot, and I could see exactly where this was heading. Tessa wasn't just my sister-in-law anymore. She was a problem. A well-dressed, perfectly coiffed, strategically positioned problem who smiled while sharpening her knives. And the worst part? I couldn't even complain to my wife about it without sounding paranoid. This was going to be fun. The thing about betrayal is that it rarely announces itself with dramatic music and a villain monologue. In movies, you get ominous lighting and a sinister reveal where someone explains their entire evil plan while cackling maniacally. In real life, betrayal wears business casual and happens in a folder left by the printer at 4:30 on a Wednesday afternoon when everyone else has already gone home because Ashley organized another mandatory team bonding happy hour at that overpriced gastropub downtown that serves $12 French fries and calls them artisanal. I'd skip the happy hour, obviously. Not because I'm antisocial. Okay, partially because I'm antisocial, but mainly because I had actual work to do. The kind that doesn't involve pretending to care about craft beer selections or listening to Gavin explain his latest revolutionary insight that he'd clearly stolen from a podcast he'd listened to that morning. Plus, Tessa would be there, and watching her laugh at Gavin's jokes while touching his arm every 15 seconds wasn't exactly my idea of unwinding after a long day. So there I was, alone in the office except for the cleaning crew and Marcus, our night security guard who spent most of his shift watching soap opera reruns on his phone and occasionally wandering the halls to make sure nobody was stealing laptops. The printer had been jamming all day. This temperamental beast of a machine that we'd bought refurbished because someone in accounting, probably Leo, had decided that spending money on reliable office equipment was for suckers and companies with actual budgets. I'd printed out a contract that needed reviewing, and naturally, the printer had eaten it halfway through and made sounds like a dying robot having an existential crisis. So I did what every IT department hates, but every office worker does anyway. I opened up the printer, started pulling out crumpled papers, toner cartridges, and what appeared to be someone's lunch receipt from 2 months ago, and generally performed percussive maintenance until the thing agreed to cooperate. That's when I found it. Wedged between the paper tray and some internal mechanism that I'm pretty sure was held together by hopes and dreams, there was a folder. Not just any folder, a navy blue presentation folder with the Helios Dynamics logo embossed on the front, the kind we used for board meetings and investor presentations. The kind that contained information someone definitely didn't want floating around the office accidentally. I pulled it out, brushed off some toner dust, and opened it. Strategic Reorganization Plan, Confidential, read the title page. Prepared by Tessa Morrison, Chief People Officer, in collaboration with Gavin Chun, CEO. Chief People Officer. She'd actually given herself that title in an official document. The audacity was almost impressive. I flipped to the next page, expecting maybe some generic corporate restructuring nonsense about optimizing workflows and leveraging synergies, the kind of meaningless business jargon that sounds important but means absolutely nothing. Instead, I found an organizational chart. Our current structure on the left, the proposed structure on the right. And there, in the proposed structure, was my name with a little box around it, and one word written underneath in red pen. Redundant. I actually laughed out loud. Marcus, doing his rounds, poked his head into the printer room and asked if I was okay. Never better, I said, holding up the folder. Just found out I'm redundant. Real confidence booster. He nodded sympathetically, having no idea what I was talking about, and went back to his soap operas. I kept reading, because apparently I'm a masochist who enjoys emotional self-harm. The plan was detailed, thorough, and absolutely brutal in its efficiency. According to Tessa's carefully crafted proposal, my position as Strategic Operations Director was being streamlined to eliminate duplicate leadership functions and create a more agile decision-making structure. Translation. They were firing me and dividing my responsibilities between other people, primarily Tessa herself, who according to this document was being promoted to, wait for it, Chief Operations Officer. Not just Chief People Officer. Full COO. Second in command of the entire company. The woman had been here for 4 months. For months. I'd spent 2 years building this company from 5 laptops and a dream, and she was going to waltz in, smile pretty, flirt with the CEO, and take everything I created. The best part? The reorganization was scheduled to take effect in 6 weeks, right after our quarterly board meeting. They'd probably already planned the whole thing. Announced the restructuring as a strategic evolution, frame my departure as a mutual decision to pursue other opportunities, and have champagne in the conference room while I cleaned out my desk. I kept flipping through the pages, each one more insulting than the last. There was a budget breakdown showing how much money they'd save by eliminating my position. There was a timeline for transitioning my projects to other team members. There was even a draft press release about our exciting organizational changes and our commitment to operational excellence under new leadership. They'd thought of everything, every detail, every angle, except one. They'd forgotten that I was the guy who wrote the contracts, who built the legal framework, who understood exactly how every policy, every agreement, every clause in every document actually worked. My hands weren't even shaking as I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Every page, every chart, every condescending word of Tessa's proposal. The lighting in the printer room was terrible, but I didn't care. I adjusted the angle, made sure everything was legible, and methodically documented the entire plan. Then I found something even more interesting tucked into the back of the folder: email printouts. A conversation between Tessa and Gavin from 3 weeks ago. Gavin, I really think we need to discuss the Caleb situation. He's been resistant to the changes we're implementing, and I'm concerned about his alignment with our vision moving forward. I know, I've noticed the same thing. He's great at operations, but maybe not the right fit for where we're heading. Let's talk strategy. Gee, how about dinner Thursday? We can discuss the transition plan. My treat. The next email was Gavin's response. Perfect. Looking forward to it. I actually had to sit down on the floor next to the printer for a minute, just processing the sheer magnitude of what I was looking at. This wasn't just corporate restructuring. This was a coordinated campaign. Tessa had spent 4 months systematically positioning herself as Gavin's trusted advisor, planting seeds of doubt about my resistance to change and my misalignment with company vision, all while probably batting her eyelashes and ordering expensive wine on the company card. And Gavin, brilliant visionary that he was, had fallen for it completely. The guy who'd called me his strategic backbone, who'd spent hundreds of late nights venting to me about his dreams and fears, who'd built this entire company alongside me. He was ready to throw me out like yesterday's cold brew because his new HR director told him I wasn't a culture fit. I could have confronted them right then. Could have marched down to that gastropub, slammed the folder on their table in front of the entire team, and demanded an explanation. Could have called Gavin out for being a disloyal, backstabbing sellout, who cared more about impressing my sister-in-law than remembering who'd actually built this company with him. But that would have been messy, emotional, unprofessional, and I'm not that guy. Instead, I carefully put the folder back exactly where I'd found it, wedged between the printer components like it had never been touched. I finished fixing the printer, grabbed my contract, and went back to my desk. I uploaded all the photos to my private cloud storage, the same place I'd been quietly archiving every suspicious email, every questionable decision, every little piece of evidence that Tessa and Gavin were playing games they didn't fully understand. Then I opened my email and sent Gavin a message. Hey, fix the printer. Should be good now. Have fun at the happy hour. Short, friendly, completely normal. I leaned back in my chair, looked at my office, my desk with its coffee-stained coasters, my whiteboard covered in project timelines, my bookshelf full of corporate law references and business strategy books, and smiled. Oh, I said to the empty room, this is going to be fun. Because Tessa and Gavin thought they were playing chess. They had no idea I'd been playing a completely different game the entire time. You know what normal people do when they get stressed at work? They go to yoga classes. They take up meditation. They buy adult coloring books with inspirational quotes about breathing and letting go of things they can't control. They talk to therapists who nod sympathetically and suggest establishing healthy boundaries. Me? I became a documentary filmmaker, except instead of filming nature documentaries or true crime series, I was creating a comprehensive archive of corporate misconduct that would make the Pentagon's filing system look disorganized. It started innocently enough, about 2 weeks after Tessa arrived, and I noticed that the tone of emails in the office had shifted from, "Hey, what do you think about this?" to, "Per our conversation, as discussed, please be advised." You know you're in trouble when people start using "per our conversation" in internal emails. That's not communication. That's building a legal defense. And if someone's building a legal defense, you better start building yours. So I started saving emails. Just the weird ones at first. The ones where Tessa would CC Gavin on something completely routine, but somehow make it sound like I'd personally insulted her grandmother and kicked her dog. Caleb, per your response regarding the office supplies budget, I feel we need to revisit your understanding of collaborative decision-making processes. Translation: how dare you question why I need a $1,500 ergonomic chair when everyone else has IKEA furniture? Then I started noticing patterns. Gavin would send me an email at 9 in the morning asking for my input on something. Normal, right? Except 3 hours later, Tessa would send a follow-up email, also to Gavin, with me CC'd, offering a completely different perspective and subtly implying that my approach was traditional or risk-averse or my personal favorite, not aligned with our growth trajectory. Growth trajectory. Like we were launching rockets instead of helping mid-sized companies figure out their supply chains. Every single one of those emails. Saved. Categorized. Time-stamped. I created a folder structure that would make a librarian weep with joy. Main folder. Professional documentation. Subfolders organized by month. Then by topic. Budget discussions, project reassignments, questionable HR decisions, and my personal favorite. Things that will definitely be relevant later. But emails were just the beginning. I started screenshotting everything. Every Slack message where Tessa would tag Gavin in a conversation and mysteriously forget to include me, even though I was literally the person in charge of whatever they were discussing. Every calendar invitation where my name got removed from meetings I'd been attending for 2 years. Every tiny little digital footprint of their campaign to edge me out while smiling to my face during company lunches. My private Google Drive started looking like an FBI investigation folder, except with better formatting and color-coded labels. I had spreadsheets tracking the timeline of when things started changing. I had a document listing every project that got reassigned from me to cross-functional teams led by Tessa. I even had a chart, because I'm that kind of nerd, showing the correlation between Tessa's late-night strategy sessions with Gavin and the subsequent decisions that somehow always benefited her position while undermining mine. Leo caught me one day, hunched over my laptop during lunch, muttering to myself while updating my evidence files. "Dude, are you okay? You look like a conspiracy theorist who just discovered the truth about Area 51. "I'm not a conspiracy theorist if the conspiracy is real," I said, not looking up from my screen. That's exactly what a conspiracy theorist would say. He wasn't wrong, but he also wasn't seeing what I was seeing. Every day brought new material. Gavin would approve something Tessa suggested without consulting me, even though it directly affected my department. Tessa would implement a new policy that somehow required her approval on things that used to be my decision. It was like watching someone slowly redecorate your house while you still lived in it, moving your furniture one piece at a time until suddenly you realized you were sleeping in the garage. But the real masterpiece, the Mona Lisa of my documentary archive, was the exit clause. See, about 6 months into Tessa's reign of passive-aggressive terror, Gavin decided we needed to update our executive employment agreements to reflect our current organizational maturity. This was lawyer speak for, "We're big enough now that we might actually get sued, so let's make sure we're covered." He asked me to draft the new agreements, which was hilarious in retrospect. It's like asking someone to design their own prison cell and trusting them not to include a secret escape tunnel. I spent 3 weeks on those contracts. Most of it was standard stuff. Non-compete clauses, intellectual property agreements, the usual corporate protections. But buried in Section 9, subsection B, under termination and severance provisions, I crafted something beautiful. The clause read, in perfectly boring legalese, in the event of termination without written documented cause, including but not limited to elimination of position, restructuring, or strategic realignment, the departing executive shall receive full severance compensation as outlined in Appendix C, plus additional breach penalties calculated at 6 months of base salary, payable within 30 days of termination notice. To anyone skimming the document, which, let's be honest, is how 90% of executives read contracts, it looked like standard protection for the company. Written documented cause sounds like something that protects the employer, right? Like you need serious evidence to fire someone? Wrong. What it actually meant was that unless they could produce written documentation of specific performance failures or misconduct, not just "we're restructuring," or "your position is redundant," or "we don't think you're a culture fit," they owed me not just my severance package, but also 6 months of additional salary as a penalty for breach of contract. And the best part? I'd structured the severance package itself to be extremely generous. 3 months of base salary, continued health insurance for 6 months, and stock options that vested immediately upon termination. I'd sold it to Gavin as competitive executive compensation that will help us attract top talent. And he'd loved it because it made us look like a serious company that valued its leadership. Add the breach penalty on top of that, and terminating me without cause would cost the company close to a year's salary plus benefits. For a startup that was still watching its burn rate like a hawk watching a particularly interesting mouse, that was a catastrophic expense. I presented the contracts to Gavin on a Friday afternoon, right before one of his strategy dinners with Tessa. He was distracted, checking his phone every 30 seconds, probably reading her texts about which overpriced restaurant they should try. "This looks great, Caleb," he said, barely glancing at the 50-page document. "You really know your stuff, man. This is exactly the kind of professional framework we need. Just want to make sure we're protected," I said, managing not to smile. "You always do. That's why you're my strategic backbone." He signed it right there, with a flourish that suggested he thought he was signing the Declaration of Independence instead of his own corporate death warrant. Getting Tessa to sign was even easier. I'd included a provision that all department heads needed to review and acknowledge the executive agreements, framing it as ensuring HR compliance and organizational alignment. She signed hers during a team meeting, barely looking at it, probably too busy thinking about how soon she could implement her reorganization plan. I watched her signature, this elaborate T with a swirl that she probably practiced in high school, dry on the page, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. They both signed it. With confidence. With big, bold strokes that screamed, "I definitely read this document thoroughly and understand all its implications." I made 3 copies of each signed contract. One went in the official company files. One went to our corporate lawyer for safekeeping. And one went into my personal archive, scanned and backed up in 4 different cloud storage locations because I'm paranoid and also not stupid. That night, I went home and told Mara I'd had a productive day at work. She asked if everything was okay with Tessa at the office, if having her sister around was weird. "It's fine," I said. "Actually, I think we're really starting to work well together." It wasn't even a lie. We were working together. She was working to destroy my career, and I was working to make sure that when she tried, it would cost her everything. I almost wanted to frame those signatures, hang them on my wall like hunting trophies. But that would have been tacky. Instead, I just filed them away, patient and careful, waiting for the day they'd try to use them. Fast forward 2 years, and I'm sitting at a restaurant called Ambrosia overlooking the caldera in Santorini, which is basically a fancy way of saying I'm eating overpriced seafood while staring at a volcano that might kill us all someday, but looks absolutely gorgeous doing it. The sun is doing that Mediterranean thing where it turns the entire sky into a Bob Ross painting. All pinks and oranges and colors that don't seem physically possible, but somehow exist anyway. There are white buildings clinging to cliffs like they're auditioning for a postcard, and tourists everywhere taking the exact same photo from slightly different angles, convinced theirs will somehow be unique. Mara is across from me, working on her 3rd glass of Assertico wine. This Greek white wine that she's convinced is changing her life, and scrolling through her phone, trying to decide which of the 73 sunset photos she took today is worthy of Instagram. She's wearing this blue sundress that matches the domed roofs behind us, and her hair is doing that thing where the wind keeps blowing it around, and she keeps tucking it behind her ear only for it to immediately escape again. "This one or this one?" she asks, holding up her phone to show me 2 photos that look identical to my untrained eye. "The second one," I say confidently, having absolutely no idea which is which. "Really? I was thinking the first one has better lighting." "Then definitely the first one." She rolls her eyes but smiles, going back to her editing apps and filters that will somehow make this already perfect sunset look even more perfect. This is our 4th day in Santorini, and we've fallen into this comfortable vacation rhythm where the biggest decision we have to make is whether to have lunch at noon or 1 o'clock, and whether afternoon naps are mandatory or just strongly recommended. We've been planning this trip for 8 months. Mara had been dreaming about Greece since she was a kid watching My Big Fat Greek Wedding on repeat, and I'd been dreaming about 2 weeks where I didn't have to think about quarterly projections or strategic realignments or my sister-in-law's increasingly elaborate schemes to make my professional life a waking nightmare. The waiter, a different guy than Dimitri from the beach, this one named Stavros, equally charming but with less shameless flirting, brings us our main course. Some kind of grilled octopus for Mara that looks like something from a science fiction movie, and moussaka for me, because I'm basic and I like things I can pronounce. He also brings more bread, because apparently Greek waiters have a moral obligation to make sure you never have an empty breadbasket, even if you're already full enough to burst. This is perfect, Mara sighs, putting down her phone and actually looking at me instead of her screen. We should do this more often. Just disconnect. Be present. Stop thinking about work for 5 seconds. Agreed. I say, taking a bite of moussaka that's probably adding years to my life through sheer deliciousness alone. I mean it, Caleb. You've been so stressed lately. I know things at Helios have been intense, and I know. She pauses, choosing her words carefully. I know working with Tessa hasn't been easy. This is the dance we've been doing for 2 years. Mara knows her sister is difficult. She knows Tessa has a tendency to be competitive, controlling, and occasionally sociopathic. But she's still her sister, and there's this unspoken rule that I'm supposed to just deal with it, because family is complicated and blood is thicker than water and all those other cliches that people use to excuse toxic behavior. It's fine, I say, which is what I always say. We're managing. Are you though? Because sometimes I feel like you're hiding things from me. Like there's something going on that you're not telling me about. She's not wrong. I've been hiding a lot. Like the fact that her sister is actively trying to destroy my career. Or that I've been building a legal case against my own company for the past 18 months. Or that I've been sleeping slightly less well knowing that any day now, the reorganization plan could become reality. But what am I supposed to say? Hey honey, your sister is manipulating my boss and systematically dismantling everything I've built. But don't worry, I've got a secret exit clause that's going to financially devastate the company when they try to fire me. That's not exactly pillow talk material. I promise. Everything's under control, I tell her, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. This is exactly what I needed. Just you, me, and overpriced Mediterranean food in one of the most beautiful places on earth. No work, no stress, just us. She smiles, seeming satisfied with this answer, and goes back to her octopus, which she's attacking with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for people who genuinely enjoy eating things with tentacles. That's when my phone buzzes. It's sitting face down on the table next to my wine glass, and I've been doing such a good job ignoring it all week. I'd turned off almost all my notifications except for actual emergencies and texts from Mara, who's sitting right in front of me. So whoever this is has managed to bypass my carefully constructed digital boundaries. Don't, Mara says, watching me glance at the phone. Whatever it is can wait. We're on vacation. We're disconnected, remember? You're right, I say, picking up my wine glass instead. The phone buzzes again. Then a third time. Okay, that's weird, Mara admits. Maybe you should check. What if something happened? What if something happened? Famous last words. I pick up the phone, fully expecting to see some kind of family emergency, or maybe Jake sending me increasingly desperate messages about covering his shift at our fantasy football league draft. Instead, I see email notifications from Helios Dynamics. 3 of them. All from Tessa, all marked urgent. The subject line of the first one makes me laugh so hard that Stavros looks over from across the restaurant with concern. Your role has been eliminated. Your severance is canceled. I open it, because apparently I hate myself and also because there's something darkly hilarious about getting fired via email while eating moussaka on a Greek island. The email is a masterpiece of corporate cruelty dressed up in HR language. She's used every buzzword, every professional euphemism, every passive-aggressive phrase in the handbook. Effective immediately, your position as Strategic Operations Director has been eliminated as part of our organizational restructuring initiative. After careful consideration and consultation with executive leadership, we have determined that your severance package, as outlined in your employment agreement, will not be applicable in this scenario due to performance-related concerns and documented incidents of insubordination. Performance-related concerns. Documented incidents of insubordination. She'd actually written that. Put it in an official company email. Sent it to me while I was on a beach eating octopus 7,000 miles away. The second email was a formal termination letter attached as a PDF, complete with legal language and Gavin's digital signature at the bottom. The third was a reminder to return all company property within 5 business days and to coordinate my exit interview with, surprise, Tessa herself. I start laughing. Not a polite chuckle or a bitter bark, but a full, genuine, tears-in-my-eyes laugh that makes other diners turn to look at the crazy American having some kind of breakdown at table 7. Caleb, Mara's voice cuts through my hysteria. What's wrong? What happened? I just got fired. I managed to say between laughs. Her face goes through about 15 emotions in 3 seconds. Shock, confusion, anger, concern, and then landing somewhere around bewilderment. You what? By who? What are you talking about? Your sister just sent me an email terminating my employment. While we're eating dinner. In Greece. On our vacation. I'm still laughing, wiping tears from my eyes. She did what? Mara grabs my phone, reading the email, her expression shifting from confused to furious. This is insane. This is... Caleb, why are you laughing? This isn't funny, but it is funny. It's hilarious. Because Tessa thinks she's won. She thinks she's finally gotten rid of me, cleared the path for her promotion, convinced Gavin that I was the problem all along. She's probably sitting in the office right now, toasting with champagne, celebrating her victory. She has no idea what's coming. I pull my phone back from Mara and open my email. I could write a long response. Could threaten legal action. Could CC the entire board and make a scene. Could forward it to our lawyer with an explanation of how spectacularly illegal this is. Instead, I typed one word. Thanks. Short, professional, polite, and loaded with more implications than Tessa's tiny vindictive brain could possibly comprehend. I hit send and set my phone down, still grinning. Caleb, Mara says carefully, like she's talking to someone who might be having a stroke. Are you okay? Should we go home? Should we call someone? I'm perfect, I say, raising my wine glass. To family. She stares at me like I've lost my mind, which is fair. Trust me, I tell her. Everything's going to be fine. Better than fine. She doesn't look convinced, but she clinks her glass against mine anyway. Stavros brings us dessert, baklava that neither of us ordered, but he insists we need. I eat mine slowly, savoring every honey-soaked bite, thinking about Section 9, Subsection B, and about how tomorrow morning, Seattle time, someone's world is about to implode. The thing about revenge is that it tastes better with breakfast. Specifically, it tastes better with a full Greek breakfast spread on a hotel balcony overlooking the Aegean Sea, while the people who wronged you are waking up in Seattle to discover they've made a catastrophic mistake that's about to cost them everything they've worked for. I woke up at 6:30 in the morning, which in Seattle time was 8:30 the previous evening, but my body clock didn't care about time zones. It cared about the fact that I had a nuclear bomb to detonate, and I wanted to be fully caffeinated when I did it. Mara was still asleep, curled up under the white hotel sheets with her hair spread across the pillow like she was posing for a Mediterranean lifestyle magazine. She'd been restless all night, worried about me, about our finances, about what we were going to do now that I was suddenly unemployed. I told her not to worry. I told her everything was under control. She'd looked at me like I'd suggested we solve our problems by joining a cult or investing in cryptocurrency, which is to say, with deep skepticism and mild concern for my mental health. But she didn't know what I knew. She didn't know about Section 9, Subsection B. She didn't know about my meticulously documented archive of corporate misconduct. She didn't know that I'd spent 2 years building a legal fortress around myself, while Tessa and Gavin thought they were the ones playing chess. I made coffee using the hotel room's fancy espresso machine that probably cost more than my first car and took it out to the balcony. The sun was just starting to come up, painting the caldera in shades of gold and pink that looked photoshopped but weren't. Somewhere down below, fishermen were heading out for their morning catch, and tourists were probably already lining up for those sunrise photos that would make everyone back home jealous. I pulled out my laptop, because yes, I brought my laptop on vacation, and yes, Mara had given me grief about it, but now who was the paranoid one? And opened my email. Tessa's termination message was still there, glowing with smug satisfaction even through the screen. I forwarded it to exactly one person, Mr. Jacob Kaplan, Esquire, the corporate attorney who handled all of Helios Dynamics' legal affairs, and who, coincidentally, was the same lawyer who'd helped me file all those executive employment agreements 2 years ago. My message was simple, professional, and more lethal than anything I could have written in anger. Mr. Kaplan, I hope this email finds you well. I received the attached termination notice from Helios Dynamics while on approved vacation leave. I believe this may violate the terms outlined in Section 9, Subsection B of my executive employment agreement, specifically regarding termination without documented cause. Could you please review and advise? I'm available for consultation at your earliest convenience. Best regards, Caleb. I hit send at exactly 8 o'clock Seattle time, which meant Kaplan would receive it right as he was settling into his office with his morning coffee, probably reading through emails and preparing for what he thought would be a normal Tuesday. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock. I knew this because board meetings were always scheduled for 10 o'clock on Tuesdays, like clockwork, because Gavin believed in structured predictability for important decisions, which was hilarious coming from a guy who once decided to pivot our entire business strategy based on a dream he had about dolphins. I sipped my coffee and waited. Somewhere across the hotel, a rooster was crowing, which seemed dramatically appropriate. At 8:15 Seattle time, my phone started buzzing. Text messages from Leo, our CFO, who was apparently already at the office because Leo didn't believe in work-life balance, only work and occasionally eating lunch at his desk while reviewing spreadsheets. Dude, Kaplan just showed up. Looks pissed. Then, 2 minutes later, he's in with Gavin. Doors closed. This is wild. Then, wait, is this about you? Did something happen? I typed back. Just enjoying my vacation. How's the weather there? Caleb, what did you do? I didn't respond. I was too busy imagining Kaplan walking into Gavin's office with my email printed out, his lawyer face on, ready to explain exactly how much money they were about to lose because they'd tried to fire someone without reading the contract he wrote for himself. At 9:45, Leo texted again. Emergency board meeting moved up to 10. Tessa just walked in looking like she's about to throw up. Tell me what's happening. At 9:58, Kaplan's reading something out loud. Can't hear everything, but I caught breach of contract and substantial penalties. Gavin just dropped his coffee mug. I almost felt bad for the coffee mug. It was probably one of those expensive ceramic ones with a motivational quote about disruption or innovation or some other startup nonsense. Now it was probably shattered on the floor, a casualty of executive hubris. At 10:03, dude, Kaplan just read out your exit clause word for word. Tessa's face is red. I mean red. Like tomato red. Like, I just realized I made a huge mistake red. At 10:05, Gavin's asking why he signed this. Kaplan just said, you tell me, you signed it. This is better than reality TV. At 10:06, someone just said the word lawsuit. Multiple times. This is insane. At 10:07, they're calculating numbers. Holy shit, Caleb. Holy shit. I ordered room service. Full breakfast. Extra bacon. Scrambled eggs. Fresh fruit. Orange juice. More coffee. The works. Because nothing pairs with professional vindication quite like a breakfast that costs €40 and comes with cloth napkins. Mara emerged from the bedroom looking confused and slightly concerned. Why are you grinning like that? It's creepy. You look like a villain from a movie who just revealed his master plan. Just checking emails, I said innocently. At 7 in the morning? On vacation? After you got fired yesterday? Technically, it's 10 in the morning in Seattle. And technically, I didn't get fired. I got terminated without cause, which is very different legally speaking. She stared at me for a long moment. Caleb, what did you do? I forwarded an email to our lawyer. That's it. That's it. Why do I feel like you're not telling me something? Because you're very perceptive and also you know me well enough to know that I don't just forward emails to lawyers without having a very good reason and possibly a contingency plan and also maybe 2 years' worth of documented evidence supporting my position. She sat down across from me, pulled my coffee cup out of my hands, and took a sip. Start talking. All of it. What's really going on? So I told her about the reorganization plan I'd found by the printer, about the exit clause I'd written into the contracts, about Tessa's campaign to push me out and Gavin's complete betrayal of everything we'd built together, about my archive of evidence and emails and screenshots, about Section 9, Subsection B, and how much money it was about to cost them. She listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through shock, anger, pride, and something that might have been grudging respect. You sneaky bastard, she finally said. I prefer a strategically prepared professional. My sister tried to destroy your career. She did destroy my career. She just didn't realize I'd built an ejection seat. And now they have to pay you? A lot. Plus penalties. Plus my original severance. It's going to be expensive. My phone buzzed again. Leo. Gavin just left the conference room. Looked like he might cry. Tessa's still in there. Her mascara is running. This is the best day of my life. Then, they're calling an emergency audit. Someone just said your name 12 times in 3 minutes. Pretty sure you're a legend now. Then, also they just deactivated Gavin's email. Is that normal? Should I be worried? I showed Mara the texts. She read them, shook her head, and started laughing. This is insane. This is completely insane. My sister is going to kill you. Or me. Or both of us. She can try, I said. But she'll have to wait until after breakfast. Room service arrived, perfect timing. A Greek hotel employee wheeled in a cart loaded with enough food to feed a small family, complete with warm bread, honey, yogurt, and yes, extra bacon, because I'd specifically requested it, and I was celebrating. Mara poured herself orange juice and raised her glass. To my husband, apparently a criminal mastermind who's been secretly planning corporate revenge for 2 years. To proper documentation and reading contracts before you sign them, I countered. We clinked glasses while the sun rose over Santorini, and in Seattle, 8,000 miles away, my former CEO and sister-in-law were discovering that karma doesn't just come around. Sometimes it shows up with a lawyer and a carefully worded employment clause. The beautiful thing about watching your enemies self-destruct is that you don't actually have to do anything except sit back, sip your overpriced Greek coffee, and let the consequences of their own actions play out like a particularly satisfying episode of a reality show where everyone you hate gets voted off the island simultaneously. By noon Seattle time, which was 10 at night in Santorini, because time zones are a cruel mistress, my phone had become a live feed of corporate chaos that was so entertaining I almost felt guilty for enjoying it this much. Almost, but not quite. Guilt requires feeling bad about something, and I felt absolutely spectacular. Leo had evolved from shocked bystander to my personal war correspondent, sending me updates every 15 minutes like he was reporting from a battlefield, which, in a way, he was. Corporate warfare is still warfare, just with less actual bloodshed and more passive-aggressive emails. Kaplan just left, Leo texted at noon 15. Spent 2 hours with the board. Gavin's been in his office with the door closed since. Someone heard crying. Can't confirm if it was Gavin or Tessa. Maybe both. At 12:30, dude, your severance just got approved. But not just approved. Tripled. They're paying out everything plus penalties plus some other stuff. Kaplan made them add. I saw the number. It's obscene. At 12:45. Also, they're doing a full company audit. Everything. Every email, every approval, every decision made in the last 2 years. Someone said forensic accounting, and I nearly dropped my sandwich. I was sitting at a taverna with Mara, eating lunch, some kind of grilled fish that was probably swimming in the Mediterranean this morning, and trying to pretend I wasn't obsessively checking my phone every 30 seconds. Mara had given up trying to have a normal conversation and had instead embraced the chaos, reading Leo's updates over my shoulder and providing color commentary. Your CFO has missed his calling, she said, munching on a Greek salad. He should be writing live tweets for sporting events. He actually wanted to be a sports journalist in college, I said. But his parents convinced him accounting was more stable. They were wrong. This is way more exciting than sports. At 1:15, my phone rang. Not a text this time. An actual phone call from a Seattle number I didn't recognize. I considered ignoring it, letting it go to voicemail, maintaining my vacation facade of not caring. But curiosity won out, because I'm only human and this was too good not to witness in real time. Caleb Morrison, I answered, trying to sound casual, like I hadn't been waiting for this call all day. Mr. Morrison, this is Jacob Kaplan. I hope I'm not interrupting your vacation. His voice had that lawyer quality where everything sounded both friendly and slightly threatening, like a predator who'd learned to smile. Not at all. Just having lunch. What can I do for you? I wanted to personally inform you that the board has accepted your termination as valid under the circumstances outlined in your employment agreement. Your severance package, including all penalties and provisions detailed in Section 9, subsection B, has been approved and will be processed within the next 72 hours. I could hear the smile in his voice. Kaplan had been practicing law for 30 years, and I'm pretty sure this was his favorite day ever. Nothing makes a corporate lawyer happier than watching a contract they filed work exactly as written, especially when it's demolishing someone who should have read said contract more carefully. That's good to hear, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I also wanted to mention that during our review of the circumstances surrounding your termination, certain irregularities came to light regarding the decision-making process. The board has requested a full audit of executive decisions made over the past 24 months. Irregularities, I repeated, letting the word hang in the air like a particularly interesting piece of modern art. Yes, it appears there may have been some conflicts of interest, undisclosed relationships, and unauthorized expenditures that warrant further investigation. I can't go into details, of course, but I thought you'd want to know that the board is taking this very seriously. Translation: they'd found the emails, the dinner receipts, the strategy sessions that were really just Tessa and Gavin playing footsie on the company dime. Everything I'd carefully documented and archived was now being examined by forensic accountants who got paid to find exactly this kind of thing. I appreciate you keeping me informed, I said. One more thing, Mr. Morrison. Off the record? His voice dropped slightly, taking on a tone that was almost conspiratorial. That exit clause was brilliant. I've been reviewing employment contracts for 3 decades, and that's one of the cleanest pieces of protective language I've ever seen. You wrote it yourself? I did. Magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. They signed it without even reading it, didn't they? I believe they were focused on other priorities at the time. He laughed. A genuine, delighted laugh that made me like him about 40% more. Well, those priorities just became very expensive. Enjoy your vacation, Mr. Morrison. You've earned it. He hung up, and I sat there holding my phone, grinning like an idiot while Mara watched me with a mixture of amusement and concern. Good news? She asked. The best news. They're paying everything, plus penalties, plus whatever else Kaplan managed to squeeze out of them. And Tessa? Full audit. Forensic accounting. They're going to find everything. She took a long drink of her wine, processing this information. You know she's going to blame you for this. For all of it. She can blame me all she wants. Doesn't change the fact that she's the one who sent the termination email. She's the one who didn't read the contract. She's the one who spent 2 years making decisions based on personal vendettas instead of professional judgment. My phone buzzed again. Leo, naturally. IT just deactivated Gavin and Tessa's email accounts. Both of them. At the same time. Someone in IT said they've been ordered to preserve all emails for the audit. This is wild. Then, 5 minutes later, Gavin just came out of his office. Looked like death. Said something about voluntary resignation and left. Just walked out. Didn't take his stuff or anything. Just left. Then, another 10 minutes. Tessa tried to go into her office. Her badge doesn't work anymore. Security is escorting her out. She's arguing with them. Someone's filming this on their phone. I need popcorn. Mara read these over my shoulder and whistled low. Wow, they're really not messing around. When you commit corporate misconduct and it costs the company 6 figures in severance penalties, they tend to take it seriously. 6 figures? Jesus, Caleb. Plus my original severance. Plus benefits. Plus the stock options that just vested. It's more than 6 figures. She stared at me for a long moment. We're okay, aren't we? Financially, I mean. We're going to be okay. We're more than okay. We're better than okay. Where I don't need to work for at least a year, okay. Over the next few hours, the updates kept coming. Gavin's LinkedIn profile went dark. His Twitter account disappeared. His entire digital presence evaporated like he'd decided to become a monk in Tibet who'd taken a vow of social media silence. Tessa lasted slightly longer, about 36 hours before her LinkedIn changed from Chief People Officer at Helios Dynamics to Open to Opportunities. Her profile picture, which had been a professional headshot where she looked like a corporate warrior ready to crush dreams and optimize workflows, got replaced with something more casual. Damage control. Trying to look approachable and human after being exposed as neither. Someone from the office, Ashley, probably, because she was the only one who still tried to maintain office gossip networks like it was a full-time job, sent me an email with the subject line, OMG, did you hear? The email detailed, in breathless run-on sentences with way too many exclamation points, how Tessa had tried to badge into the building the next morning and been turned away by security. How she demanded to speak to someone in charge and been politely informed that she was no longer employed there. How she'd threatened to sue, which was hilarious considering the company was probably about to sue her. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post about it on social media. I didn't send gloating emails or make victory calls. I just sat on that balcony in Santorini, watching the sun set over the caldera for the 5th night in a row, drinking wine that cost more than it should but tasted absolutely perfect, knowing that sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just being right and having receipts. Mara squeezed my hand. Family dinner is going to be so awkward. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my wine. By Friday, which was officially 1 week since I'd received that beautiful termination email and unofficially the best week of my professional life, the fallout at Helios Dynamics had settled into what I can only describe as a cautionary tale that would probably be taught in business school courses about what not to do when you're trying to fire someone who writes contracts for a living. Leo had been keeping me updated with the kind of dedication usually reserved for people live tweeting natural disasters or season finales of prestige television dramas. According to his increasingly excited messages, the board had moved faster than a tech startup pivoting after a failed product launch. They'd brought in an interim CEO, some guy named Richard who'd previously run a manufacturing company and apparently believed in radical transparency and ethical leadership, which were just fancy terms for not being a backstabbing weasel. New CEO seems cool, Leo texted Thursday afternoon. Doesn't wear turtlenecks. Major improvement already. Then, also he just said in the all-hands meeting that we will not tolerate conflicts of interest or personal vendettas masquerading as business decisions. Everyone looked at where Tessa's desk used to be. Chef's kiss moment. By Friday morning, they'd hired a new HR director, a woman named Patricia Chun, no relation to Gavin, thank God, who had 20 years of experience, impeccable references, and apparently a personality that could best be described as aggressively professional. Her first order of business was implementing a new policy that Leo forwarded to me with approximately 15 laughing emojis. All executive employment agreements must be reviewed by external legal counsel and approved by at least 3 board members before implementation. Furthermore, no employee shall be terminated without documented performance reviews and board consultation. It was basically a rule that said, never mess with the guy who writes the contracts, without explicitly saying it, which made it even better. I'd become a corporate legend without even trying. The cautionary tale. The reason they now had a 3-page policy on proper termination procedures. I screenshot the policy and sent it to Mara with the caption, "I'm famous." She replied with, "You're insufferable." Then, but also kind of impressive. Then, don't let it go to your head. Too late. It had absolutely gone to my head. I was lying on a beach lounger, drinking a Freddo cappuccino. This Greek iced coffee situation that was changing my entire perspective on what coffee could be, wearing sunglasses that cost more than they should, and feeling like the protagonist of a movie where the good guy actually wins for once. Gavin's digital disappearance had been swift and thorough. His LinkedIn profile hadn't just gone dark, it had vanished entirely, like he'd decided to erase his professional existence and start over as a hermit living off the grid. His Twitter account, which had been full of inspirational quotes about disruption and innovation and other startup buzzwords, was gone. His Instagram, where he used to post photos of his morning cold brew and inspirational sunrises with captions about grinding and hustling, had been deleted. It was like watching someone realize they'd been the villain in their own story and deciding the only solution was to completely disappear from public view. Leo had heard through the office grapevine, which, even with Gavin gone, was somehow still functioning at full capacity, that he'd moved back in with his parents in Portland and was taking time to reassess his priorities. Translation: he was hiding from the professional consequences of his own terrible decisions and probably sleeping in his childhood bedroom under a poster of Steve Jobs while his mom made him breakfast and wondered where she went wrong. Tessa's handling of the situation was somehow even more entertaining. She'd lasted exactly 48 hours before posting on LinkedIn. One of those posts that you know was written and rewritten about 70 times, probably with input from a PR consultant or a very expensive therapist or both. After an incredible journey of growth and learning at Helios Dynamics, I've decided to take time for personal development and exploration. Sometimes the universe redirects us toward new opportunities that better align with our authentic selves. I'm excited to see where this next chapter leads. #new beginnings, #personal growth, #open to opportunities. I read it 3 times, showed it to Mara, and we both laughed until we couldn't breathe. Personal development, Mara wheezed. She got fired for corporate misconduct, and she's calling it personal development. The universe redirected her right out of a job. I added, how authentic. Should you comment something supportive? Mara asked, wiping tears from her eyes. I considered it. I really did. I thought about writing something like, wishing you the best in your journey of self-discovery, or growth is so important, or even just a simple congratulations on this exciting new chapter. But all of those felt too much like twisting the knife, and I'd already won. There's a fine line between victory and being a petty asshole, and I was trying to stay on the right side of it. Instead, I just liked the post. One single, solitary like that could mean anything from genuine support to the most passive-aggressive acknowledgement of someone's downfall ever crafted. Let her interpret it however she wanted. Within an hour, several former colleagues had liked it too. Ashley, obviously, because she liked everything. Dimitri the programmer, who probably didn't even read it. And a few other people who were either being genuinely supportive or enjoying the schadenfreude in their own subtle ways. What Tessa didn't post about was the fact that she was facing potential legal action from Helios Dynamics for breach of fiduciary duty and misuse of company resources, or that the audit had uncovered approximately 47 dinner receipts from expensive restaurants, all charged to the company card, all marked as executive strategy sessions, all featuring the same two people, her and Gavin, or that her reference calls were probably going about, as well as a blind date with someone who'd Googled you and found out you'd been fired from your last job under suspicious circumstances. The professional world is smaller than people think, and word travels fast, especially when that word involves corporate scandals and people who thought they were too clever to get caught. Mara had been processing the whole situation in stages. First came shock, then anger at her sister, then concern about family dynamics, and finally, around Thursday afternoon, while we were walking through OIA taking the same tourist photos everyone takes, she landed on resigned amusement. Thanksgiving is going to be so awkward, she said, stopping to photograph a blue-domed church that looked exactly like every other blue-domed church we'd photographed that week. I thought about it. About sitting around a table with Tessa, probably at their parents' house in Tacoma. Everyone trying to pretend like nothing had happened while the elephant in the room wore a name tag that said, remember when Tessa tried to destroy Caleb's career and it backfired. Spectacularly, it's going to be legendarily uncomfortable, I agreed. Mom's going to try to play peacemaker. She's going to make comments about family being more important than work. She's going to ask us to let bygones be bygones. Your mom is a saint with terrible judgment about conflict resolution. Dad's going to hide in the garage pretending to fix things that aren't broken. Your dad is a smart man. She turned to face me, lowering her phone for once. Seriously though, how are we going to handle this? She's my sister. She tried to ruin your life. I'm supposed to just, what? Pretend it didn't happen. You don't have to pretend anything, I said. But you also don't have to choose between us. I never asked you to. She might ask me to. Then she's putting you in an impossible position, which is very on-brand for her, honestly. Mara laughed despite herself. You're not going to make this easy, are you? I'm not going to show up to Thanksgiving and start drama. I'm not going to bring it up. I'm not going to gloat or make pointed comments or accidentally mention severance packages over mashed potatoes. But I'm also not going to apologize for defending myself, or pretend she didn't do what she did, or act like we're all just going to move past this without acknowledging that your sister tried to destroy my career and failed because she was too arrogant to read a contract. That's fair, Mara said quietly. Besides, I added, grinning, she can try to make things awkward all she wants. She can give me death glares across the dinner table. She can make passive-aggressive comments about unemployment or career transitions, or whatever euphemism she's using for, I got fired for being corrupt. And none of it matters. Because, honey, she can't fire me from Thanksgiving. That's not how family dinners work. I'm married to you, which means I'm contractually obligated to show up to family functions and eat dry turkey and pretend to care about your uncle's political opinions. Mara started laughing, really laughing, the kind that makes your shoulders shake and your eyes water. You're comparing family dinners to employment contracts. Everything's a contract if you think about it hard enough. You're ridiculous. I'm right though. She kissed me, right there in front of the blue-domed church while a group of tourists tried to get the perfect sunset photo and probably caught us in the background of their Instagram posts. Yeah, she said. You're right. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my home office, which is really just a converted spare bedroom with a desk I assembled wrong from IKEA and a view of our neighbor's slightly overgrown garden. Sipping whiskey that costs more than I used to spend on groceries in a week, watching my bank balance glow on my monitor like a particularly satisfying video game score. The whiskey is a 15-year-old Macallan that I bought specifically for this moment. For this quiet evening in early spring when the rain is doing that Pacific Northwest thing where it's not quite raining, but not quite not raining. Just existing in a state of eternal dampness that makes you want to stay inside and contemplate your life choices. Except my life choices have worked out spectacularly well. So really I'm just sitting here feeling smug and slightly buzzed on expensive scotch. My severance package cleared 3 weeks after that phone call with Kaplan. The number was obscene. The kind of number that makes you check your bank account 3 times to make sure there wasn't a decimal point error or some kind of clerical mistake. Base severance plus breach penalties plus accelerated stock options plus what I can only assume was hazard pay for dealing with Tessa's nonsense for 2 years. All told, it came out to more money than I'd made in the previous 3 years combined. I'd done the responsible thing first, paid off our mortgage, because Mara had strong feelings about debt and financial security, and also because there's something deeply satisfying about owning your house outright at 35. Then I'd maxed out our retirement accounts, set up a college fund for the kids we don't have yet, but probably will someday, and donated a generous amount to a legal aid nonprofit, because if my experience taught me anything, it's that good lawyers are worth their weight in gold and not everyone can afford them. The rest? The rest was sitting in various investment accounts, earning interest, being responsible and boring, and exactly what you're supposed to do when you suddenly have more money than you know what to do with. But I kept some in checking. Enough to feel wealthy. Enough to buy expensive whiskey and occasionally pick up dinner tabs without checking the prices first. Enough to feel like I'd won. The home office had become my fortress of solitude, my cave of contemplation, my room where I could ignore the world and think about everything that had happened over the past year. The walls were mostly bare. Mara kept threatening to decorate them with something that doesn't make you look like a serial killer, which was harsh but probably fair. The only thing I'd hung up was a framed copy of Section 9, Subsection B of my Executive Employment Agreement, matted and mounted like it was the Declaration of Independence. Mara thought it was weird. I thought it was art. It's a reminder, I told her when she found me hanging it up. Of what? Your weird vendetta against my sister. Of the importance of reading contracts before you sign them. Also of the fact that sometimes the best revenge is just being better at your job than the people trying to destroy you. She'd rolled her eyes, but let me keep it, which is one of the many reasons I married her. The fallout from Helios Dynamics had continued to provide entertainment for months. Gavin had resurfaced briefly on LinkedIn with a new profile that listed him as a business consultant and leadership coach, which was code for unemployed and desperately trying to rebrand. His profile picture showed him hiking somewhere with mountains in the background, looking contemplative and spiritual, and like someone who'd learned important lessons about humility and ethics, and definitely not like someone who'd been fired for letting his HR director manipulate him into destroying a colleague's career. He'd sent me a connection request 3 months ago. I let it sit in pending status for 2 weeks before declining it. Not out of spite. Okay, maybe a little out of spite, but mainly because what exactly would we have talked about? Hey, remember when we built a company together, and then you tried to fire me illegally, and it cost you everything? Good times, let's connect. Tessa had been quieter. Her LinkedIn updates had slowed from daily inspirational posts about growth and authenticity to occasional shares of articles about career transitions and resilience. She'd landed a job eventually, some mid-level HR position at a healthcare company in Spokane, which meant she'd moved 300 miles away from Seattle and, more importantly, from us. Thanksgiving had indeed been exactly as awkward as predicted. We'd shown up at Mara's parents' house with wine and pie and our best fake smiles. Tessa had been there with her new boyfriend, some guy named Derek who worked in pharmaceutical sales and talked exclusively about his CrossFit routines and his Peloton stats. She'd barely looked at me all evening. When we did make eye contact, usually accidentally while reaching for the same dish at dinner, she'd smile this tight little smile that didn't reach her eyes and said things like, "Pass the potatoes, please," in a voice that could freeze water. Mara's mom had indeed tried to play peacemaker, making comments about how family is what matters most, and we all need to support each other through difficult times. Her dad had indeed spent most of the evening in the garage, emerging only to eat and then disappearing again with mumbled excuses about a loose cabinet hinge that needed immediate attention. I'd been perfectly polite, perfectly civil. I'd asked Derek about his Peloton PRs and pretended to care about his opinions on protein supplements. I'd helped clear dishes and complimented the turkey and acted like a normal person at a normal family gathering where absolutely no one had tried to destroy anyone else's career. At the end of the night, as we were putting on our coats to leave, Tessa had pulled Mara aside for a private conversation in the kitchen. I couldn't hear what was said, but I could see Mara's body language shifting from receptive to defensive to finally just tired. In the car on the way home, Mara had told me, "She wanted me to ask you to let things go. Said she's learned from her mistakes and hopes we can all move forward." "What did you say?" "I said that you already let things go. You let them go directly to a lawyer who made sure she faced consequences for her actions, and that if she wanted to move forward, she could start by acknowledging what she did instead of pretending she's the victim here." I'd reached over and squeezed her hand, suddenly overwhelmed with love for this woman who'd chosen to see the truth even when it was easier to just keep the peace. "Your family still likes me, right?" I'd asked. "Dad does. Mom's trying. Tessa will get over it eventually. Or she won't. Either way, we're fine." Now, 6 months later, we were more than fine. We were thriving. I'd started consulting independently, helping small companies build better operational frameworks, and, more importantly, helping them write employment contracts that actually protected employees instead of just looking like they did. Word of mouth had spread quickly. Apparently, there was a market for someone who could write airtight legal documents and had a proven track record of making them work. I had 3 steady clients, enough work to stay busy but not enough to stress me out, and the kind of professional reputation that came from being the guy who'd outsmarted his own company. People wanted to hire someone who understood the game that well. Leo had left Helios Dynamics 2 months ago and joined a startup that was doing something incomprehensible with blockchain and artificial intelligence. He still texted me regularly with updates about how much he missed the drama of our old office, which had apparently become aggressively professional under the new leadership. "It's so boring now," he'd complained last week. "Everyone reads documents before signing them. HR follows actual procedures. There's no chaos. I'm dying of competence." When people asked me what I'd done for revenge, and people always asked, because apparently the story had spread through Seattle's business community like a particularly juicy piece of gossip, I told them the truth. Nothing illegal. Nothing unethical. Just logical. I'd written good contracts. I'd documented everything. I'd been better at my job than the people trying to destroy me had been at theirs. When they tried to fire me, I'd simply let the consequences of their own actions play out. Revenge didn't need to be dramatic. It didn't need to be loud or explosive or vindictive. Sometimes the best revenge was just being right and having receipts. I raised my glass of Macallan toward my framed contract on the wall, toward the rain-soaked window, toward Seattle and Spokane, and wherever Gavin was hiking and taking contemplative photos. "Cheers," I said to no one in particular. To Tessa, who thought an email could end me. To Gavin, who forgot that loyalty goes both ways. To Section 9, Subsection B, the most beautiful paragraph I've ever written. Your coffee hit the floor. Your mascara ran. Your empire collapsed. And me? I'm sitting here with expensive whiskey, a paid-off mortgage, and the satisfaction of knowing that I won by simply being better at the game than you knew you were playing. Too late now.